Welcome back to Mr. Cursed. What if I told you that scary things hide deep in the Appalachian Mountains? Today I'm sharing 8 true creepy stories that will give you goosebumps. These aren't made up. They really happen to real people just like you and me. Before we start, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, after you hear these stories, you'll think twice before going into those dark mountains. Let's jump right in. I was 31 years old, just a substitute teacher scraping by on $80 a day, when Principal Hendricks called me about the emergency bus route. To be honest, I should have known something was off when she sounded that desperate on the phone. "Please," she said, "we just need someone to finish out this week. Mrs. Patterson." She had to leave unexpectedly. What she didn't tell me right away was that Mrs. Patterson had abandoned the bus mid-route with kids still on it. Just walked away and left them sitting there. The janitor found the bus idling empty at 4:30 in the afternoon, doors open, kids nowhere to be found. They'd all walked home on their own. Some of them lived 25 miles from school, deep in West Virginia coal country. When I got to the school that Monday, Hendricks handed me the route map with shaking hands. Some of the stops were crossed out in fresh red ink. "Those families moved," she said quickly. "Don't stop there anymore." I found out later that the driver before Patterson lasted exactly 13 days. The one before that, also 13 days. Looking back now, I should have asked more questions. The bus was from 1994, all dented yellow metal and cracked vinyl seats. Soon as I climbed in, I smelled it. This sweet smell mixed with rust, like formaldehyde maybe, made my stomach turn a little, but I needed the work. First pickup was at 3:15 p.m. My list showed 23 kids, kindergarten through high school. The little ones were supposed to sit up front, teenagers in back. Pretty standard stuff. The kids all seemed normal when they got on. Maybe too normal, if that makes sense. Too quiet, too well-behaved. They'd nod at me politely and take their seats without the usual chaos you'd expect. After the third stop, I counted heads in my rearview mirror. 26 kids, 3 more than my list showed. The extra 3 were wearing clothes from the 1970s. Bell-bottom jeans, butterfly call. Arse, everything faded like old photographs. At first I figured they were just poor kids wearing hand-me-downs, but something felt wrong about them. When I looked in my mirror, I could see empty seats where they should have been sitting, but the other kids moved around them like they were there. A little girl named Emma leaned forward and whispered, "Don't look directly at them, mister. They're still burning inside." That sweet smell got stronger near those 3 kids, like overripe fruit mixed with something else. Something that reminded me of charred meat. Every time we passed one of those red-crossed stops on my map, they'd stand up, press their faces against the windows, then sit back down without saying a word. The boy in the middle had melted skin covering half his face. I'm not exaggerating. It looked like candle wax, dripping but never actually falling. The temperature around them dropped so fast that ice started forming on the windows, even though it was 70 degrees outside. At 3:47 p.m. exactly, all 3 of them turned to stare at me. Where their eyes should have been, there were just empty sockets with tiny flames flickering way back in the darkness. The tallest one spoke, and his voice sounded like grinding gravel. "You're not taking us home again." That's when the real kids started praying under their breath. One girl's nose started bleeding just from sitting near them. When we reached Sawmill Road, the 3 ghost children, because that's what they were, I knew it by then, stood up and walked to the front of the bus. The cold came with them, making my breath fog up. "This is our stop," the melted boy said, pointing to one of the red-crossed addresses on my map. I kept driving. I didn't know what else to do. They screamed. Not angry screams, terrified ones like they were reliving something horrible. The sound was so loud that the windows cracked. 2 of us, real kids, passed out, and several more had blood coming from their ears. I stopped the bus. Had to. The 3 of them walked through the closed door, not around it, through it, and headed toward what looked like a burned foundation in the trees. A kid named Tommy, maybe 14 years old, leaned forward and explained, October 13th, 1978. School bus crashed right there, burned for 6 hours. Driver was drunk, hit that oak tree, and the doors got jammed shut. 8 kids cooked alive inside. The radio turned on by itself and started playing something that made my blood freeze. It was the original emergency call from 1978, a dispatcher's voice, crackling and distant, and in the background, children screaming. At each red-crossed stop, more ghost children appeared. All 8 victims, each one more burned than the last. They got on through the walls, through the ceiling, through the floor, surrounded by smoke that wasn't really there but somehow still made my eyes water. Tommy told me his grandfather was the original drunk driver. Survived the crash but heard them forever, he said. If you don't pick them up, they follow the living kids home and burn their houses down at night. The ghost children started combusting right there in front of me. Their skin bubbled and their clothes caught fire, but the flames never actually consumed anything. The living kids had to sing the school song to keep them calm. If they stopped singing, the dead ones would burn everything. I realized we were driving the exact same route as that 1978 crash. Same speed, same time, heading toward the same fate. At 4:13 p.m., the exact time of the original crash, the steering wheel started turning itself toward that same oak tree. The ghost kids were crying now, begging, "Please don't let us burn again." The living children held hands and sang louder, their voices somehow cooling the flames dancing around the dead ones. The melted boy reached out and touched my shoulder. Suddenly, I could see it all. The moment of impact, the doors that wouldn't open, the flames climbing high, while they screamed for help that never came. "Every day we ride," he whispered. "Every day we burn. Every day we try to get home." I did the only thing I could think of. Instead of following the regular route, I drove them home, to their actual 1978 addresses, not the school. Each house was long gone, but somehow the families were still there. Aged parents who'd been waiting 45 years, standing in overgrown lots where their homes used to be. At the first stop, a ghost mother fell to her knees crying, "David, is that really you, baby?" One by one, the burned children ran to their ghost parents, finally reuniting. As they embraced, the flames went out completely. The melted boy was last. His father, the drunk driver, was waiting at the crash site itself. "I'm sorry, son." The father's ghost wept. "I'm so sorry." They hugged, and both of them just dissolved into nothing. The bus suddenly felt warm again. The windows defrosted, and that awful sweet smell disappeared completely. The real kids were crying, but they were tears of joy. They told me later that they'd never made it past this point before. Every day had been the same nightmare, over and over. When we got back to school, Principal Hendricks was waiting with parents and Father Mackenzie, the priest who apparently knew the whole story. Nobody seemed surprised. I looked at the route map one more time. The red crosses had changed to gold stars, and someone had written in neat handwriting, "Delivered safely home, October 13th, 2023. I never drove that route again. Hendricks understood. She said they'd been looking for someone brave enough to break the cycle for 45 years. I still substitute teach, but I won't take any job that involves driving kids. Sometimes I wake up at 4:13 a.m. exactly, and I can smell that sweet, sick smell for just a moment before it fades away. I never told anyone this story until now. But every October 13th, I drive out to that old oak tree and leave some flowers. Not for the drunk driver, for those 8 kids who just wanted to go home. They finally made it. Back when I was 41, I worked heavy equipment for a living. Dozers, mostly. Been doing it since I was 22, and honestly, it's good work if you don't mind the heat and the noise. I was running reclamation jobs around West Virginia. You know, going back to old strip mines and trying to make them look like mountains again. Push dirt around, cover up the scars, plant some grass, hope for the best. The state pays decent for that kind of work, and after my divorce, I needed every dollar I could get. That's how I ended up at the old Monarch mine site in the fall of 2019. Should have been a simple job. 3 weeks, maybe a month if the weather turned bad. Just me and 2 other operators, Tommy and Luis. We'd worked together before. Good guys, knew what they were doing. The Monarch site had been shut down since 1992. Company pulled out after what the paperwork called equipment failures and geological instability. I'd seen those kinds of reports before. Usually meant someone got hurt or the coal ran out and they didn't want to say which. The pit was maybe 200 acres, carved right into the side of what used to be a pretty mountain. You could still see where the forest started on the edges, but the middle was just this huge bowl of gray rock and red clay, weeds growing up through the rubble. Our job was to push topsoil over the whole mess and seed it for grass. Make it look natural again, even though everyone knew it never would be. First day there, I found the deer skulls. Must have been 30 or 40 of them, all arranged in perfect circles at the bottom of the pit. Not scattered like you'd expect from hunting or predators. Arranged. Somebody had taken the time to make patterns with them, like crop circles but made of bone. I radioed Tommy and Luis and they came down to look. Luis crossed himself when he saw them. Tommy just shook his head and said something about hunters having too much time on their hands. But the skulls were old, bleached white, and there were no other bones around. Just the skulls, nothing else. That afternoon, my dozer hit something hard about 30 feet down. I thought it was bedrock at first, but when I backed off and looked at what I'd uncovered, it wasn't rock. It was structured, like someone had woven metal cables together, or maybe thick roots. But it had this organic look to it, like it had grown instead of being built. The stuff was white, almost gray, and it felt wrong to look at. I radioed the boss, and he said to keep working. Probably just old mining equipment they'd buried instead of hauling out. But I'd been around mining equipment my whole career, and this wasn't that. Tommy and Luis found similar structures scattered around their sections, always about 30 feet down, always that same woven pattern. We'd uncover a piece, push dirt over it, and find another one 20 yards away. The boss drove out that evening to look, took one glance, and told us to keep working. Probably root systems, he said, but his voice had that tight sound people get when they're trying to convince themselves of something. That night, I saw something moving in the pit. I was packing up my gear when something caught my eye down in the bottom. Fast, low to the ground, white as paper. Just a flash, then gone. I thought maybe it was a dog or a big cat, but it moved wrong. Too fluid, like it was flowing instead of running. Tommy saw it too, made some joke about mine rats, but his voice shook when he said it. We all felt it. That weight in the air that means something's watching you. I convinced the other guys to help me set up floodlights that night. We wanted to see what we were dealing with. Used the generator from Luis's truck and ran cable down into the pit. By 10 p.m., we had the whole bottom lit up like a football field. Then we sat in my truck with coffee and waited. At 2 a.m, they came out. They emerged from the structures we'd been uncovering all week. Pale, insect-like. Things about the size of medium dogs. 6 legs each, no eyes that I could see, and mouths that opened in 4 directions like a flower blooming. There were dozens of them, all moving together like they shared one brain. They flowed around the bottom of the pit, never bumping into each other, never hesitating, and they were building something. Using the mine tailings, the loose rock and dirt we'd been pushing around, they started constructing this spiral tower, working with their mouths and front legs, moving with purpose and intelligence. By dawn, the tower was 20 feet tall and humming, actually humming, like power lines in the wind, but deeper. You could feel it in your chest. Luis found the old mining records that morning, dug them out of the county office, copies from 1992. The last entry before Monarch shut down said they'd hit a cavity system full of what the report called unidentified white fauna. The mine supervisor had ordered it sealed immediately. No details, no explanation. Just sealed. That's when we understood. The structures we'd been uncovering weren't equipment or root systems. They were eggs, cocoons, nurseries, and we'd been digging them up for a week. The things were hauling deer carcasses into the pit now, whole deer, dragged from somewhere in the mountains. They arranged the bodies in geometric patterns around their towers, and the towers kept humming. More wildlife started showing up. Rabbits, squirrels, even a black bear. all of them walking calmly down into the pit like they were being called to dinner. The humming was doing something to them, making them come. On the third day, Tommy's dozer broke through into a massive cavity. The machine just dropped, front end first, into a hole the size of a swimming pool. Tommy jumped clear, but before he could run, they swarmed up out of the hole. Hundreds of them. They didn't attack him, meow made it worse. Instead, they started taking his dozer apart while he watched. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, like they were studying how it worked. Then they used the metal to build more structures. Tommy ran, but something was wrong with his back. He kept reaching over his shoulder, trying to scratch between his shoulder blades. By the time he made it to my truck, I could see what was bothering him. There was a white mass growing on his shirt, spreading across the fabric like spilled paint. But it wasn't paint, it was alive. The company sent more crews the next morning. Men with flamethrowers and diesel fuel, orders to burn everything in the pit and cover it with concrete. The fire made them scream, high-pitched, almost beyond what you can hear, like feedback from a microphone, made our ears bleed and our teeth ache. But the fire also cracked open more cocoons deeper in the cavity system, bigger ones. The things that came out had wings. They sprayed something from their mouths, a white substance that hardened instantly. 3 of the company men got covered in it, turned into statues. They were still alive, still breathing, but they couldn't move, couldn't talk, just stood there with their eyes wide open, trapped in shells of hardened white foam. That's when one of them approached me. Smaller than the others, different somehow. It used its mouth to draw symbols in the dirt at my feet. Pictures. It showed me the mountain as it used to be before the mining. Showed me their civilization underneath, cities carved from rock, connected by the tunnel systems we'd been breaking into. We'd destroyed their world with strip mining, exposed their nurseries to the surface, killed thousands of them over the decades. They weren't hostile, not originally. They were just trying to rebuild, to roof over their broken world and protect what was left of their people. The white subs. Tants was construction material, living cement they produced to seal their tunnels. But every time they tried to rebuild, humans came back to dig. It showed me deeper symbols, older ones. They'd been here before humans, before mammals. The coal we'd been mining for over a century was their ancestors, compressed and fossilized over millions of years. We'd been burning their dead for fuel, and they were reclaiming their cemetery. The smaller one offered a deal, drew it clearly in the dirt, boundaries, territory, an agreement. Leave this mountain alone, let them stay in the deep places, and they'd remain underground. Otherwise, they'd adapt to surface life. It showed me visions of what that would look like. Their white shells covering buildings, converting cities, spreading across the landscape like living concrete. The boss ordered us to flood the pit with cement, bury everything, and pretend it never happened. They retaliated by emerging in thousands, covering every piece of equipment we had, turning our machines into material for their construction. But the small one stopped them, drew new symbols in the dirt, a boundary treaty. They'd take this mountain, the full 100 acres of the old monarch site, and no more. They'd stay deep, away from humans, if we marked it off limits and never came back. The company agreed. Officially, the site got listed as unstable geology, permanent exclusion zone. No development, no mining, no access. Before we packed up and left, the small one touched my hand. Just for a second, barely made contact. But it left a mark, a white spot on my palm that never faded. Sometimes, usually at night, it burns, gets hot like a fever blister. When that happens, I know they're building down there, creating something massive in the deep places under the mountain. The treaty's held for 5 years now. The monarch site sits empty, growing over with weeds and young trees. You can find it on maps, marked with warnings about unstable ground and toxic runoff. But I drive by sometimes, and I can see lights moving in the woods at night. Not fly, ash lights. Something else, something white and flowing. The mark on my hand is burning more often now, and I've started seeing reports from other states, other mining operations hitting cavities they can't explain. I think the treaty only holds as long as we don't dig too deep anywhere else, as long as we leave their burial grounds alone. But humans never could leave well enough alone. Sooner or later, someone's going to break through somewhere they shouldn't. And when that happens, I don't think they'll bother with treaties the second time around. I was 47 when my brother Dale finally talked me into going hunting again. I hadn't been in the woods with a rifle since I was maybe 27, back when our dad was still alive and would take us out every November. But Dale kept saying we both needed to get away from everything. He was 44, working at Home Depot, and had been drinking way too much since his wife packed up and left him 6 months earlier. Me, I was just trying to get my head straight after my divorce got finalized. Warehouse supervisor doesn't pay enough to keep up with 2 households, and honestly, I needed something to take my mind off the whole mess. Dale knew our Uncle Jim had this hunting cabin up near Cummins Falls in Tennessee, about 40 miles from the nearest real town. Uncle Jim used to let family use it during hunting season, but he'd been missing since 2018. They found his truck parked at the trailhead, keys still in it, rifle gone, but never found him. The family figured maybe he had a heart attack out there and animals got to him before anyone could search properly. Dale said Jim's widow told him the key was still hidden under the fake rock by the front steps, and we were welcome to use the place if we wanted. We drove up there on a Friday afternoon in November. The cabin looked exactly like I remembered from when we were kids. Small log structure with a stone chimney, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to go on forever. Dale found the key right where it was supposed to be, and we got our stuff inside before dark. The place smelled like old wood and something musty, but it was clean enough. Dale started a fire while I unpacked our gear. That's when I found Uncle Jim's journal on the kitchen table. It was open to the last entry he'd written, dated 3 days before he disappeared. All it said was, "The mountain demands its hunters. I understand now." Dale laughed when I showed him, said Uncle G. M was always dramatic about everything. But I noticed Dale's hands were shaking a little when he opened his first beer. We both felt something off about the place, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. We set our alarms for 4 a.m. and planned to take our positions in the tree stands Uncle Jim had set up about 800 yards apart. Dale had brought walkie-talkies so we could stay in touch. The morning was perfect for hunting. No wind at all, crystal clear, so quiet you could hear every leaf that fell. Maybe too perfect. Around 7 a.m. I saw this massive buck through the trees. Had to be a 12-pointer, biggest deer I'd ever seen in person. But something was wrong with the way it moved. It walked like a marionette, you know? Like someone was pulling its strings. But the strings were all tangled up. Jerky steps, head tilting at weird angles. I got it in my scope to get a better look, and that's when I saw its eyes. They were completely white, like cataracts. But there was something moving behind them, like little worms or something, squirming around under the surface. And the deer itself, Jesus, it looked like it had been dead for weeks. I could see exposed ribs where the hide had rotted away, intestines dragging behind it, bones showing through tears in its legs. But the worst part was when it stopped walking and looked directly at me through my scope. It smiled, with human teeth. Dale's voice crackled over the radio right then. "Blake, you seeing this? There's dozens of them down here, all walking uphill in perfect lines." I looked around and started noticing more of them. Not just deer, bears, coyotes, rabbits, all kinds of animals. All of them had the same fatal wounds, all of them walking in the same direction like they were being called somewhere. A black bear walked right past my tree stand with its throat completely torn out, and maggots were falling from the wound. Like snow. We should have left right then. I know that now. But something made us follow them. Maybe curiosity, maybe something else pulling us along. Our phones started acting weird, showing us walking in directions that didn't make sense according to the GPS. The compass spun like it was broken. About a mile in, we found bones, old ones, scattered along what looked like an animal trail. All kinds of animals, but they were all pointing in the same direction the wounded ones were walking. Dale found a human skull mixed in with the animal bones. It had antlers growing right through the eye sockets, and when he turned it over, I saw a gold tooth. Uncle Jim had a gold tooth just like that. 2 miles deeper, we came to a clearing that shouldn't have existed. It wasn't on any map, and when I checked my GPS, it just showed blank space where we were standing. In the center was this massive oak tree, had to be 500 years old or more. The trunk was maybe 20 feet around, and I swear to God, it was pulsing like a heartbeat. The bark was translucent, like you could see through it, and there were these dark veins underneath pumping black fluid up and down the trunk. Dozens of those dying animals were pressed up against it, and as we watched, they were being absorbed into the tree somehow. Their antlers became branches, their eyes turned into knots in the bark, their fur transformed into moss. It happened fast, maybe 30 seconds per animal. "Blake," Dale whispered, grabbing my arm. "Look at the roots." The root system was massive, spreading out in all directions, but you could see human skeletons mixed in with the wood like they were feeding the tree from underground. And leaning against the trunk was Uncle Jim's rifle, being slowly consumed by the bark that was growing over it. The tree's branches moved even though there was no wind, reaching down toward us, dripping that black sap like saliva. One of the roots brushed against my boot, and instantly, my whole leg went numb. I couldn't control it. It started walking forward on its own, carrying me toward the trunk. K. Dale shot the root with his .30-06, blowing it apart, and my leg stopped moving. But where the black sap hit the ground, tiny versions of the tree started sprouting immediately. That's when we heard the voices, hundreds of them coming from inside the trunk. All different, but all saying the same kinds of things. Hunters from years past, maybe centuries. Uncle Jim's voice was the clearest. "It needs predator souls, Blake. Hunters, hunting hunters." The tree showed us things then, like visions projected right into our heads. Native Americans bringing warriors to feed it. Early settlers offering up trappers and woodsmen. Generation after generation, every hunting season, it took its tax. The strongest predators, the best hunters. Dale shot at the trunk, but the bullets just disappeared into the bark, and the tree laughed with our father's voice. Black sap erupted like arterial spray, and each drop that hit the ground grew into grasping saplings that reached for our ankles. The dying animals turned toward us then, still dying, still rotting, but now hunting us. A deer with its guts hanging out charged at us, trying to gore us with broken antlers. The forest itself joined in, branches grabbing at us, roots erupting from the ground, paths disappearing and reappearing to herd us back toward the oak. Dale screamed. Something underground had grabbed his ankle and was pulling him down. I cut him free with my hunting knife, but his foot was already growing bark, dark wood spreading up his calf like an infection. I carried him on my shoulders, but he kept getting heavier as the wood replaced his flesh. Trees kept falling across our path, trying to block us in. Dale's eyes went white like the deer's had been, and he whispered in a voice that wasn't his. "I can hear it all now, Blake, the whole forest network." By the time we reached the truck, Dale's left side was completely bark, rooting into my shoulder where he'd been hanging on. He looked at me with those white eyes and said in Uncle Jim's voice, "The forest needs hunters, Blake. One stays, one tells the story." He climbed down and walked back into the woods. Each step he took sprouted leaves from his feet. Just before the trees swallowed him up, he turned and said, "It's beautiful here, Blake. So peaceful." I got one text from his phone about an hour later. "The hunting is eternal. Join us next season." I drove 20 hours straight home, only stopping for gas. But those roots keep growing from my shoulder where Dale touched me. Every full moon, I dream I'm inside that tree, hunting with Dale and Uncle Jim through an endless forest. I wake up in my yard, covered in dirt, holding antlers I don't remember collecting. I don't hunt anymore. I don't even go camping. And every November, when hunting season starts, I get texts from Dale's disconnected phone number, just coordinates to that clearing. I've never gone back, and I never will. But sometimes, late at night, I catch myself looking up directions to Cummins Falls on my computer, and I have to close the laptop real quick before I do something stupid. I'm 24 and work at GameStop, but that's not really what I wanted to be doing with my life. Me and my girlfriend Mika had this YouTube channel where we explored abandoned places around Appalachia. Old mills, hospitals, ghost towns, that kind of thing. We'd been at it for about 2 years and actually had around 50,000 subscribers, which felt pretty good. Mika was 22, studying film in college, and she was way better with the cameras than I was. I handled the research and did most of the talking on screen. We weren't making enough to quit our day jobs, but it felt like we were building something real. The whole thing started when one of our regular viewers sent us coordinates to a place called Prosperity, Kentucky. Said it was a mining town that got abandoned back in 1962 after some kind of explosion. When I looked into it, the record showed 47 miners died in the blast. But here's the weird part. The entire town of over 400 people just vanished the same day. Not evacuated, not relocated, gone. The mining company that owned it, Blackstone Corporation, still held the deed and paid for security to keep people out, which made me wonder what exactly they were protecting. We decided to check it out on March 15, 2023. I remember the date because it was exactly 61 years after the disaster. We hiked in at dawn, using Mika's drone to scout ahead and avoid the security checkpoints. There were 3 of them posted around the perimeter, but we found a way through the woods that kept us clear. The whole thing felt like a real investigation, like we were finally doing something that mattered. When we got our first look at the town from the ridge above it, I knew something was impossible. The place looked like a museum. No decay, no overgrowth, no broken windows or collapsed roofs. Cars sat in driveways like their owners had just parked them. Houses looked freshly painted. Even the street signs were clean and readable. We walked down the main street and I checked my watch. It was about 8:30 in the morning. But every clock we could see through windows showed 2:17, every single one. That was the exact time the mine exploded in 1962. The diner still had coffee in the cups. Not old, dried coffee, hot coffee, with steam coming off it. The griddle had eggs on it, still sizzling. Mika filmed everything while I tried to wrap my head around what we were seeing. The cash register was open, money still in the drawer. A newspaper sat folded on the counter, dated March 15, 1962, and the ink looked fresh as the day it was printed. We found a school classroom with a math problem half written on the blackboard in chalk that hadn't faded. But what really got to me were the children's drawings pinned to the wall, all dated March 15, 1962. Most of them were normal kid stuff, houses, stick figure families, dogs. But a few showed black tentacles or roots coming up from underground, wrapping around stick figures. One drawing had words written in a child's handwriting. "The hungry dark that Daddy found." The stick figures in that one were being eaten by something that came from below. Our equipment started acting up around then. Mika's camera would show people in the viewfinder who weren't actually there when we looked with our eyes. In the playback later, we could see translucent figures going about their daily routines, walking down the street, sitting in the diner, working in the barbershop. The barbershop was especially creepy because there was fresh hair on the floor and scissors positioned like someone was mid-cut on an invisible customer. The sheriff's office had jail cells that were locked from the inside. Fingernails were embedded in the cell walls like someone had clawed at them until they broke off. There was a report on the sheriff's desk, though, that made my blood run cold. Black substance in mine spreading upward, evacuation efforts failed, townspeople refusing to leave. Substance appears to think, requesting immediate federal assistance. We knew we had to check out the mine. The entrance should have been sealed after 60 years, but it gaped wide open like a mouth. Cold air flowed out of it that smelled organic, like something breathing. There were warning signs in English, Spanish, Russian, and some symbols that actually hurt to look at directly, like they made my eyes water and my head ache. When Mika turned on the camera's night vision, we saw the truth. The mine was full of people, thousands of them, standing in neat rows, covered in some kind of black substance that looked like living tar. Their eyes tracked our movement. The substance connected them all, pulsing between their bodies like a circulatory system. We found the original 47 miners at the deepest point we could reach. They were arranged in a circle, hands clasped like they were praying. One of them turned his head toward us. His eyes were solid black, but his mouth moved. It came from below the coal seam. We're keeping it here, feeding it so it doesn't spread. The black substance reached toward our flashlights, moving with intelligence. It showed us visions, not of aliens or demons, but something ancient from deep in the Earth's core, older than life itself. It had been sleeping down there for millions of years until the miners dug too deep and woke it up. The town wasn't abandoned. Everyone was still there, converted into a living containment system. Blackstone Corporation knew. They'd made a deal. Sacrificed the town to keep this thing locked up. The substance needed conscious hosts to stay stable, feeding on their thoughts and memories to keep from going dormant again. Mika got too close to one of the tendrils and it wrapped around her hand. Her skin immediately started turning to black glass, spreading up her arm. But instead of screaming, she laughed. I can feel them all, Blake. 400 minds thinking together, Fu. Or 60 years. It's beautiful. That's when I understood. The preserved food throughout the town was bait. Anyone who ate it joined the collective instantly. The corporate documents we'd seen mentioned yearly inspections. Every inspector who came to check on the containment had joined it. Mika's eyes went completely black. It's not evil, Blake. Just hungry. So hungry for new experiences, new thoughts. The substance showed me the deal. Join willingly and live forever in this preserved moment, or it breaks free and consumes the nearest city, then the next, spreading through underground tunnels and cave systems. Mika made her choice. Someone has to feed it. Better one more person than millions of others. The substance let me go, but it marked me. Under UV light, I can see black veins just under my skin. As I ran out of the mine and back through town, everything began aging rapidly. 61 years caught up in 61 seconds. Buildings crumbled, cars rusted to nothing, everything turned to dust. Except Mika. She stood at the mine entrance, covered in the black substance, waving goodbye. My camera had been infected somehow. When I got home, it automatically uploaded all our footage to our YouTube channel. The video went viral. 10 million views in 3 days. Comments pouring in from people saying they were planning trips to find the place. Blackstone Corporation contacted me within a week, first offering $500,000 for my silence, then $5 million, then making threats. Mika still posts videos, weekly updates from inside the mine, giving tours of what she calls the preserved paradise. The view count is at 47 million now. Everyone who watches wants to visit, not knowing they're watching recruitment material. The substance grows stronger with each viewer it attracts. And last night, I woke up to find black veins spreading from my computer screen, reaching toward me, across my desk. I think it's time for me to join Mika. I can feel it calling to me every time I close my eyes, promising I'll never be alone again. I'm posting this as a warning, but I know most of you won't listen. If you're planning to look for Prosperity, Kentucky, just remember, some places are abandoned for a reason, and some things are better left buried. I was 58 when I took the fire lookout job on Black Mountain. I'd just retired from the Postal Service after 33 years, and honestly, the idea of sitting alone in a tower for 6 months sounded like paradise. The pay was decent, too. $600 a week just to watch for smoke and radio it in. Virginia's Department of Forestry said they were one of the last stations still using human lookouts instead of cameras. The tower was built back in 1934, 80 feet of steel and wood rising above the tree line. You could see storms coming from 100 miles away on a clear day. My supervisor, Jim, drove me up in April and showed me the basics. Radio protocols, weather reporting, supply drops every 2 weeks. The previous lookout, Danny, had quit after 3 weeks. All his stuff was still there, even a half-eaten dinner on the little table. "Why'd he leave so quick?" I asked Jim while we checked the radio equipment. Jim shrugged, but something in his face changed. Said it wasn't for him. Some people can't handle the isolation. Danny had left his logbook behind. Most entries were standard: wind direction, visibility, temperature readings. But the final entry, dated 3 days before I arrived, just said, "They watch the watchers. 7 towers, 7 points, 7 decades waiting." I figured he'd just gotten spooked by the loneliness. The first week was everything I'd hoped for, pure quiet. I spotted 2 controlled burns during my shift and called them in. Read 3 paperback novels. watched eagles hunt in the valleys below. At night, I'd sit on the observation deck and count stars I'd never seen through city lights. It was the second week when I started noticing the other towers. Through my binoculars, I could make out structures on distant ridgelines. 7 of them, arranged in what looked like a rough circle around Black Mountain. I called it in to Jim. "Oh, those old things," he said, but his voice sounded tight. "Probably old cell towers or something. Just ignore them." I tried, but something about them bothered me. Through the telescope, I could see they weren't cell towers. They were fire lookouts, just like mine, and there were people in them. The figures never moved during the day. They just stood at their windows with binoculars, all pointed toward my tower. I started timing them, checking every hour. Same position, same stillness. At first I thought maybe they were mannequins or something, left behind from when those towers were active. Then night came, and they lit their lanterns. It happened at exactly sunset, like clockwork. One by one, starting from the tower due north and moving clockwise, each lookout would light a kerosene lamp. The pattern repeated every 49 minutes. 7 towers, 7 lights, 7 minutes between each lighting. I found the hidden journals on my 3rd week. They were stuffed behind loose boards in the supply closet. Decades worth of logbooks from previous lookouts dating back to 1934. Every single one mentioned the 7 towers. Every single lookout had tried to report them, only to be told to ignore them. A 1952 entry read, "They're not watching for fires. They're watching for the 7th 7." From 1967, "I am the 6th watcher of the 7th cycle. When the 7th arrives, it emerges." 1981, "Figured it out. Every lookout becomes a watcher. I'm walking to Tower 3 tomorrow." That night, I started picking up radio chatter at 3:33 a.m. Not on our emergency frequency, but close enough that it bled through. Coordinates, but not for fires. They were tracking me. Subject 8 at 6:47. Subject read 47 pages. Subject slept 7 hours. Every number had 7s in it, or was divisible by 7. They were counting something. I started mapping every fire reported from Black Mountain since 1934. A turn made my blood run cold. Each fire formed a spiral, tightening in on the mountain. Every fire burned exactly 7 hours before being called in. All of them exactly 7 miles from my tower. July 7th changed everything. At 7:07 p.m., all 7 watchers turned their binoculars toward me simultaneously. Through my telescope, I could finally see their faces clearly. They were the previous lookouts, men from different decades, still wearing their old uniforms, but wrong somehow. 2 preserved, like they'd been frozen in time. The oldest one, in a 1930s Ranger uniform, looked exactly like the photograph in the first logbook. That's when I found Danny's real journal, hidden in the flower bin. His handwriting got shakier with each entry, but the final page was crystal clear. "I'm the 6th of the 7th. You're the 7th. Every 343 years it tries to rise. We hold it down. I can't do it anymore. I'm sorry." The radio crackled to life. "The 7th 7 has arrived. The summoning circle completes." The ground started vibrating beneath the tower. Not an earthquake. Something massive moving underneath Black Mountain itself. I grabbed my binoculars and looked toward the other towers. For the first time in decades, the watchers were moving. They walked down their towers in perfect synchronization, each carrying a lantern that burned without fuel. The flames cast shadows upward instead of down. They moved through the forest in straight lines, and I swear the trees bent aside to let them pass. They reached my tower at exactly midnight and stood in a perfect circle below me. The oldest one spoke, his voice carrying impossibly well through the night air. 7 cycles of 7 watchers. You complete the pattern." The ground cracked in a perfect heptagon around the tower's base. Something was pushing up from deep below, not a creature, but a structure. Ancient metal covered in symbols I'd never seen, like a tower built upside down, reaching into the earth instead of the sky. As it rose, the watchers explained. Not with words, but somehow I understood. The buried tower is older than America, older than the Cherokee who'd once lived here. It watched something that slept even deeper, something that couldn't be allowed to wake. Every 343 years it tried to rise. The watchers were the only thing holding it down. Danny emerged from the seventh tower, walking toward us. His face had the same wrong preservation as the others. "Every lookout becomes a watcher eventually," he said. "It's not evil, exactly, but if it escapes, it'll burn every forest on Earth. And from that smoke, something worse will come through." I felt my body moving without my permission, walking toward the tower window. My reflection in the glass showed a uniform from 1934, my face already changing, getting younger and older at the same time. The Watchers were offering me immortality, purpose, the knowledge that I was saving everyone. All I had to do was take my place in the circle and watch for the next 343 years. I threw my radio as hard as I could. It shattered against the buried tower's peak, and for a moment their synchronized hold on me broke. The buried tower started sinking back into the earth, and all 7 Watchers screamed in perfect harmony. I grabbed the emergency flare gun from the supply box and fired directly at the tower's exposed symbols. The magnesium burned white-hot through the metal. The tower collapsed back into the mountain with a sound like 1,000 trees falling. The Watchers aged instantly, 90 years in 10 seconds. They crumbled to dust, finally free. But as they fell, I heard the oldest one whisper, 343 years. Someone else will stand here. Someone else will choose. I climbed down that tower faster than any 58-year-old should be able to move and hiked 7 miles through darkness to my truck. I never filed a final report, never collected my last paycheck. Looking back now, 5 years later, I still wake up at 3:33 a.m. sometimes. I've never told anyone this story, and I never will again. But I think about that mountain every day, and I know that in 338 years, some other person looking for solitude is going to climb those 80 feet of steel and wood. I just hope they're stronger than I was, or maybe weaker. I'm still not sure if I saved everyone or doomed them all. I was 34 and working as a grocery store manager when my husband Tom decided we absolutely had to visit his grandmother's farm in North Carolina. I was 8 months pregnant at the time, swollen and exhausted. But Tom had this look in his eyes like he'd found buried treasure or something. He'd never even mentioned his grandmother had a farm until she died and left it to him in her will. Tom was 36, worked construction, and had always been pretty straightforward about family stuff. His grandmother had passed the year before, and we'd gone to the funeral, but nobody talked much about any property. Then this lawyer calls him up and says there's this 60-acre farm that's been in the Walker family for generations, and it's his now. But here's the weird part. The will had this strange condition. It said the farm must taste Walker blood before harvest, or it returns to the mountain. Tom laughed it off, said old mountain people were superstitious, but the lawyer explained it meant we had to prove we could work the land for at least one harvest season, or we'd lose it. The thing is, this farm was apparently worth millions if we could make it work. All we had to do was plant something and show we could bring in a crop. Tom figured we could rent it out to other farmers or maybe sell it to developers. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of traveling while so pregnant, but I was desperate for fresh air and a change of scenery. The baby had been kicking constantly, and I hadn't slept well in weeks. A weekend in the mountains sounded peaceful. The drive took us about 73 miles southeast of Asheville, and I swear the last 15 miles were on roads that didn't show up on our GPS. Tom kept checking this hand-drawn map the lawyer had given him, turning down these narrow mountain roads that seemed to go nowhere. But when we finally got there, honestly, it was beautiful. 60 acres of rolling hills with a white farmhouse right in the center. Wraparound porch, established apple and peach trees scattered around the property. It looked like something from a postcard. Inside the house was pristine, like Tom's grandmother had just stepped out for groceries. There was still a calendar on the kitchen wall showing May 2019, the month she died at 97 years old. Her reading glasses were folded neatly on the kitchen table next to what looked like a diary. Tom was busy exploring the rest of the house, but I sat down and opened it to the last entry. It was dated 2 days before she died, and all it said was, "The babies know when the land is ready." That's when my baby kicked so hard I doubled over and threw up right there on the kitchen floor. But Tom, this wasn't normal morning sickness. I mean, I was 8 months along. I knew what morning sickness felt like by then. This was violent and sudden, and what came up wasn't food. It was these golden, dry stalks that looked exactly like wheat, fully formed wheat stalks. Tom came running when he heard me retching, took one look at what I'd thrown up and just said it must be stress from the drive. But I could feel something changing inside me, not just the baby moving. It felt like roots were growing from where the baby was, spreading outward through my body. My belly button had popped out weeks ago like it does when you're far along, but now it's suddenly inverted, going so deep that Tom couldn't see the end when he tried to look with his phone's flashlight. I found photo albums in the living room while Tom explored the barn. Page after page of Walker family pictures, and in every single one, the pregnant women were photographed standing by this massive oak tree. The tree was still there, maybe 300 years old, surrounded by grass so green it almost hurt to look at. When I walked over to it, the baby started moving wrong. No, it kicking up like normal, but sideways, downward, like it was trying to burrow deeper into my womb. My skin started looking different in the mountain sunlight, greenish, with my veins visible like plant stems running under the surface. I pulled on Tom's sleeve to show him, but when I looked at his face, his eyes had changed. The pupils weren't round anymore. They were rectangular, like a goat's eyes. But he didn't seem to notice, didn't act any different. That's when I found the birth records in grandmother's bedroom dresser. 200 years of Walker births, all documented in careful handwriting. Every single baby born on the fall harvest moon. Every entry said the same thing. Baby planted successfully, harvest bountiful, mother transformed. I checked the dates. Every child had the same birth date and death date. They all died the day they were born. I went looking for Tom and found him behind the barn with a shovel, standing next to what had to be hundreds of tiny grave markers. All infants, all with the same date of death as their birth date. But when Tom started digging to show me something, the graves were empty. Just little holes going straight down into darkness so deep his flashlight couldn't find the bottom. That's when Tom's family started showing up. His cousins, his Aunt Martha, people I'd never met before, and nobody had called them. They all had those same rectangular pupils. Aunt Martha took my hands and explained it to me real gentle-like. "Walker blood feeds the land, dear. The land feeds the world. It's been this way for generations. Your baby isn't really yours," she said, smiling. "It belongs to the mountain. Always has. Blood remembers its purpose." The fall harvest moon was the next night. Not my due date, but apparently the farm had its own schedule. By evening, my fingernails had fallen off and been replaced by what looked like bark, spreading up my arms like gloves. I could feel the baby's thoughts, and they weren't human thoughts. They were ancient, patient, agricultural, like something that had been waiting in the earth for a very long time. Tom spent the evening digging a hole in the middle of the field. Said it was tradition, but his voice sounded different. Older somehow, like someone else was speaking through him. When the sun set, I tried to walk back to our car, but I couldn't cross the property line. My feet literally rooted to the ground at the boundary. My water broke at moonrise, dark brown fluid that smelled like fertilizer and was full of seeds. The family formed a circle around me, humming in harmony with this vibration I could feel coming up from the mountain itself. The contractions weren't pushing the baby out. They were pulling me down into the earth. When the baby finally came, it immediately burrowed deeper into the hole Tom had dug. It had roots instead of limbs, bark instead of skin. As it descended, it whispered something in a language I didn't recognize. Mother Earth, true mother. The corn that had been dead and brown all around us suddenly shot up 12 feet tall in seconds. The apple trees bloomed and fruited simultaneously. Everything was growing, feeding on what had just happened. Tom kissed my forehead and said, "The land needed our firstborn. We'll make another offering next season." They left me in that hole to bond with the land, and I could feel roots growing from my womb down into the soil. But I remembered something my mother used to say about mountain magic: iron and salt break it. I had my hospital bag with me, including my prenatal vitamins, iron supplements. I swallowed the entire bottle. The reaction was violent. My body rejected the roots, and I managed to crawl out of the hole while Tom and his family were entranced, swaying with the corn. They didn't even notice me leaving. I made it to the car, but in the rearview mirror, I could see the baby emerging from the earth, already the size of a toddler. It walked on root legs toward the car, had my face but bark skin, arms outstretched, calling "Mama" in my own voice. I floored it, and the thing ran behind us, keeping pace, crying with my voice until we reached the main road. I made it to the hospital in Asheville at dawn. The doctors found no evidence I'd ever been pregnant, just dirt in my womb where a baby should have been. They couldn't explain it, thought maybe I'd had some kind of psychological break. Tom still sends me videos every week. Our daughter growing in that field, looking about 5 years old now, made of corn and wood, still calling for Mama. He wants me to come back for next harvest season, says the land isn't done with me yet. I moved to Florida. I don't go near mountains anymore, and I never had another child. Back when I was 33, I worked park maintenance down in eastern Kentucky. Not the glamorous kind of job, you know. Mostly just fixing broken picnic tables and clearing fallen trees off hiking trails. I'd been doing it for about 6 years by then, and honestly, I thought I'd seen everything the mountains had to throw at me. Bad weather, drunk campers, the occasional black bear getting into garbage cans. Nothing I couldn't handle with some common sense and the right tools. That all changed in October 2019 when some hikers came stumbling out of the woods near Bode's Hollow, talking about screaming coming from somewhere deep in the limestone caves. Now, I'd heard plenty of weird sounds in those hills over the years. Owls can sound downright human when they want to, and wind through rock formations can play tricks on you. But these folks were shaken up bad. They kept saying the screaming wasn't right, that it sounded backward and inside out, whatever that meant. Said it went on for hours without stopping. No pause for breathing like a person would need. My supervisor, Jim, figured it was probably just wind acoustics. You know how sound can echo funny through cave systems. He told me to hike out there and check it out, maybe put up some signs if the cave mouth was dangerous. Bode's Cave wasn't on any of the tourist maps. It was part of an old limestone system that supposedly went down 400 feet or more. The local families that had been in those hills for generations, they avoided the area completely. I'd heard some of the older folks mention their grandparents used to warn them about the hollow men who lived in the deep caves, but I figured that was just mountain folklore. I packed up my usual gear, climbing ropes, headlamp, backup flashlight, emergency beacon in case I got turned around down there. Figured I'd just check the entrance, maybe rappel down the first cham. Bear if it looked safe. The hike out to Bode's Hollow took about 2 hours through some pretty rough terrain. When I found the cave mouth, it was smaller than I expected. Maybe 4 feet high, hidden behind some scraggly pine trees. But when I shined my light inside, it opened up into this massive chamber. First thing I noticed was the air. Fresh air was flowing out of that cave, which was all wrong. In a closed cave system, the air should be stale, maybe even dangerous if there's not enough oxygen. But this was like standing in front of an air conditioner, cool and clean with this slight metallic taste to it. Second thing I noticed were the boot prints. Dozens of them in the mud near the entrance, all different sizes and tread patterns. Some looked recent, some were older and filled with water. But here's what got me. Every single print was pointing into the cave, not one set coming back out. The screaming started right at sunset. I was still outside, trying to make sense of those footprints, when this sound came echoing up from deep in the cave system. It wasn't human, not exactly. Too long, no breaks for breathing, and the pitch was all wrong. But it was trying to be human, if that makes sense. Like something was mimicking a person screaming but getting the details wrong. I should have left right then. Should have hiked back to my truck and called it a day. But I was curious, and honestly, I felt bad thinking about all those people whose prints I'd seen. Maybe they were lost down there. Maybe they needed help. So I clicked on my headlamp and squeezed through that entrance. The main passage sloped down at a steep angle, and the further I went, the weirder things got. I found camping gear scattered along the walls. Sleeping bags from what looked like the 1960s right next to modern backpacks with cell phones still in the pockets. All of it abandoned, like the people, had just vanished mid-activity. Sleeping bags unrolled but never slept in, cans of food opened but barely eaten. One phone was still showing 80% battery. The temperature was wrong too. The deeper I went, the warmer it got. Cave systems are supposed to maintain a constant temperature, usually around 55 degrees, but it was getting warmer as I descended, and the air was getting thicker, harder to breathe. Then I started seeing the handprints on the walls. At first I thought someone had pressed their hands into mud or clay, leaving impressions. But when I looked closer, the handprints were inside the rock itself, like someone had pressed their hands against the limestone from the other side, pushing the rock outward. The screaming kept getting louder, and I started to make out something that sounded almost like words, but played in reverse. Like listening to a recording backward, where you know it's language but can't understand what's being said. I found a journal wedged behind some rocks, leather cover cracked and stained. The pages were filled with handwriting in different inks and pencils, like multiple people had written in it over time. Most of it was illegible, but one entry from 1983 was clear enough. They wear our faces backward. Don't let them turn you around. The walking gets hollow when you go the wrong way through time. The passage opened up into this massive chamber with 7 different tunnels branching off in all directions. The screaming was coming from every single one. My compass started spinning like crazy, couldn't get a fix on north. My phone said I was somehow 3 miles underground, which was impossible. The cave system wasn't supposed to be that deep. I chose the middle tunnel and found more scratches in the limestone, recent ones carved with something sharp. They make you walk backward into them. That's when I first saw one of the hollow men in my peripheral vision. Human shape, but wrong. It was walking backward while facing forward, its knees bending in the opposite direction from how joints are supposed to work. When I turned to look at it directly, its face was inside out, features inverted, eyes looking inward instead of outward. It was wearing a park ranger uniform from the 1970s, the old style with the wide-brimmed hat. The name tag read backward. Mirror writing I couldn't make out. When it spoke, the words came out before its mouth moved. You'll join the hollow walking. More of them started backing out of the walls, not through openings, literally emerging backward from solid rock. They were all wearing different clothes from different time periods. Hiking boots from the 80s, camping gear from last week, work clothes that looked like they were from the Depression era. All of them moving backward while facing forward, all of them speaking in reverse. I realized these were the people whose footprints I'd seen at the entrance. Hikers and cavers and curious people like me. But something had happened to them down here. They'd been turned inside out somehow, transformed into these things. The screaming wasn't random noise. It was them trying to speak forward, but everything about them was reversed now. They existed backward through time, trapped between moments. One of them grabbed my wrist, and the touch made my arm start moving backward through its own motions, like rewinding a video. But it was happening to my body. I felt myself starting to walk in reverse, my feet moving without my permission, carrying me toward the walls. That's when I understood what the cave was. The whole system was inverted space, reality folded the wrong way. The hollow men were people who'd been turned dimensionally inside out, forced to experience everything backward. And the cave was growing. Each person it took extended its inverted space a little further out into the normal world. I followed the screaming to its source, this natural formation that looked like a throat turned inside out. It pulsed the rhythm like a heartbeat, but wrong. It was swallowing space and time, digesting reality incorrectly. The hollow men were trying to push me into it, make me walk backward into complete inversion. I caught my reflection in the wet stone on the wall. I was already changing. My features were starting to invert. My left eye was sinking inward. The screaming was getting louder, and I realized some of it was my own voice from the future, trying to warn me. I had to think backward to move forward. It sounds crazy, but that's how the inverted space worked. I threw my emergency flare behind me, and in that twisted reality, it moved forward. The bright light confused them. They couldn't process forward-moving light in their backward existence. I ran with my eyes closed, using the inverted logic to find my way out. The hollow men followed, their backward screams turning into forward pleas for help as they got closer to normal space. "Don't leave us," they called. "Don't leave us, hollow." I reached the entrance just as dawn broke. Normal space reasserted itself so violently I got knocked flat. The cave mouth sealed itself behind me, limestone flowing like thick water to close the opening completely. But I didn't get out unchanged. My left hand still works backward sometimes. I'll be writing something and suddenly I'm moving the pen from right to left, forming letters in reverse. Sometimes I speak sentences backward without meaning to, and time hiccups around me. Clocks run slow when I'm near them, and my reflection in mirrors is slightly off, like it's trying to invert. I found out later that Bode's cave appears in different locations throughout the mountains, opens up for exactly 13 hours, then seals itself and moves on. The Park Service has it marked as a geological hazard now, but they don't really know what they're dealing with. I know those hollow men are still in there, walking backward through time, screaming warnings that nobody can understand. And I know that someday, somewhere else in those mountains, that cave is going to open again. When it does, some curious person is going to see those footprints going in and none coming out, and they're going to make the same mistake I almost made. I just hope they're smarter than I was. I hope they run. I hope. I'm 26 and work as a state trooper, mostly night shifts along the Blue Ridge Parkway. I've been doing this for about 8 months now, and honestly, I thought I'd seen everything you could see on a mountain highway. Drunk drivers, accidents, the occasional bear wandering into traffic, normal stuff. But there's this one spot at mile marker 47, this scenic overlook, that's been giving me and my training officer problems since I started. 6 missing persons reports in just 2 months, all the same story. Abandoned cars, doors hanging open, keys still in the ignition, like people just got out and walked away. No signs of struggle, no blood, no bodies, just gone. My training officer, Sergeant Cole, is this old-timer who's been patrolling these mountains for 20 years. He told me the Park Service keeps saying it's suicides, people jumping off the overlook, but they never find any bodies down in the valley. Cole doesn't buy it, and after what happened last Thursday night, neither do I. It was mid-October, around 11 p.m. when we got the call. Another abandoned vehicle at the same overlook. I remember the dispatcher saying it was a 2018 Honda Civic, still running, hazards blinking. Cole and I were about 15 minutes away, so we headed up there expecting the same thing we'd seen 5 times before. When we pulled up, the Civic was there all right, engine still running, driver's door wide open. There was a purse on the passenger seat, a cup of coffee in the holder that was still warm. The radio was playing some soft rock station, and the headlights were cutting through this thick fog that was rolling up from the valley below. I'd never seen fog move like that before. It was coming upward, which didn't make sense. Fog settles down. It doesn't climb. Cole started looking around the car while I walked over to the barrier at the edge of the overlook. That's when I found the foot. Prints. Fresh sneaker prints in the dirt, leading right up to the stone barrier. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. They didn't stop at the barrier. They kept going, right over the edge, like whoever it was had just kept walking into thin air. I leaned over the barrier to look down into the valley, and that fog was definitely moving wrong. It was spiraling upward in these thick tendrils, almost like it was reaching for something. And that's when I heard it. Singing. Beautiful, clear singing coming from somewhere down in that fog. It sounded like a church choir, all these voices harmonizing together. But there had to be way more voices than any normal choir could have. The sound was so pure it almost made me want to cry. "Cole," I called out, "you hearing this?" He came over, and his face went white as paper. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "How many voices is that?" The singing was getting louder. and I swear the fog was responding to it, reaching up toward us in these purposeful tendrils. I clicked on my flashlight to try to see better, but the beam did something I've never seen light do before. It curved. It bent downward into the fog like it was being pulled by gravity. That's when Cole grabbed my arm and pointed at the barrier. "Look at this," he said. There were scratches all along the stone, fingernail marks, dozens of them, like people had been trying to climb over, clawing at the rock. Some of them looked fresh, others were weathered and old. Cole went back to his patrol car and came back with some equipment I'd never seen before. A little camera and what looked like binoculars. "Security camera from the trailhead," he said, setting it up. "I've been documenting this place for months." While he was messing with the camera, I kept looking down into that fog with my flashlight. The singing was getting more insistent, and I started to make out words. Yet, or at least what sounded like words. Almost English, but not quite. Like someone trying to speak a language they'd only heard a few times. "Take a look at this," Cole said, handing me the binoculars. I looked through them, focusing on the fog about 200 feet below us. At first I couldn't see anything, just gray mist. But then the fog shifted, and I saw them. People. Dozens of people standing in the air, their feet on nothing but fog, all of them singing. Their hair and clothes were flowing like they were underwater, and they were arranged in perfect rows like a choir. "That woman in the blue dress," Cole said quietly. "She's been there for 3 months. That's the teacher who went missing in July." I focused on her, and she must have sensed me looking because she turned toward us and smiled. Then she raised her hand and beckoned for us to come down. "Cole, what the hell is that thing?" "I don't think it's a thing," he said. "I think it's things. Plural. That fog. It's not fog. It's alive. Some kind of organism that keeps people suspended, preserves them somehow. My daughter disappeared here in 1998. She's down there too." The singing was getting into my head now, making me feel drowsy and peaceful. I found myself taking a step toward the barrier without meaning to. Cole must have noticed because he grabbed me and pulled me back. "Don't listen too close," he said. "It's recruitment. Every voice down there adds to the harmony, makes it more hypnotic. They're trying to get you to join them." But even as he was talking, I was still walking toward the barrier. I couldn't help it. The fog was reaching over the edge now, these thin tendrils stretching toward us like fingers. One of them brushed against my ankle and my leg went completely numb. That's when Cole tackled me, dragging me back toward the patrol cars. "We need to get out of here," he said. "Now." As we were heading to our cars, headlights came around the curve. A family in an SUV, parents and 2 kids. They parked right next to the Honda and got out to take pictures of the valley. "No!" Cole shouted, running toward them. "Get back in your car!" But the fog was already reaching for them, especially the kids. The singing had changed to lullabies now, soft and sweet. The youngest girl, maybe 6 years old, started humming along. Cole hit his siren, a high-pitched wail that seemed to disrupt the fog somehow. It pulled back, losing its cohesion for a moment. "Everyone in your cars now," he yelled. "This area is closed." We got the family evacuated, but that little girl kept humming the whole time. Even as we drove away, the fog followed us for miles, flowing uphill along the roadside, trying to get to her. We had to take her to the hospital. She sang coordinates for 3 days straight, the same numbers over and over. The doctors said it was some kind of delayed shock response, but Cole and I knew better. The Park Service closed that overlook permanently a week later. Official reason was structural damage to the barrier, but Cole and I still patrol it anyway, unofficial-like. We keep people away during the fog events, which happen every 20 to 30 days. Cole retired last month, but sometimes I still see his car parked up there at night. He plays his daughter's favorite songs on the radio, and if you listen really carefully, you can hear someone singing along from down in the valley. Looking back now, I still don't understand what that thing in the fog really was. Cole had all these theories about it being some kind of ancient organism, older than humans, that collected consciousness like people collect stamps. All I know is I've never gone back to that overlook alone, And I never will. The Park Service can call it structural damage all they want, but I know what's really down there in that valley. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the fog rolls in, I can still hear them singing.